In this video, we're going to go over the process for painting weights in Character Creator, as well as how to set up simulated cloth as we scrub animation so we can send poses with our cloth assets to the Pose Tools plugin back in ZBrush. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about was covered in the last video, so I'm not going to belabor any of these points. I'm going to go a little bit faster. So we have a custom character that we've created. Incidentally, I should bring this up. If you want to create this character on my live stream, we have 4 or 5 live streams covering the creation process of this character, as well as the basketball Pav. If you go to ArtStation Learning, there's a 10-part Intro to ZBrush series for beginners that'll take you through the basics of ZBrush as well as creating that character. So if you're interested in that, go check those out. Now, before we send this over to Character Creator, there's a few little setup steps we need to talk about. Just like last time, we have all of our objects in here underneath Tool, Subtool. They're all labeled uniquely. They all have subdivision history. So for example, if I go to the pants upper here, you're going to see this poly count. Your poly count might be over here. This poly count is, 250,000 polygons. However, if I go down here to geometry, you can see we can drop this subdivision down. So we have a low res subdivision. I'm going to turn on polyframe here with Shift F or touching this button. You're going to see the pants that we send over are going to be relatively low poly. We're going to move those verts around in Character Creator, send those back as a pose, and then we'll have access to our higher subdivision levels to continue creating high res detail on that object. But we're not sending over a million points. We're only sending over, we're going to go over here to Subtool, all low, or you can go in here to Z plugin. Let's go ahead and grab that white dot, drag that over here to our left section here. If you don't have this open, just double click that divider to open that up. And then if we go to ZBrush Pose Tools, you can see they have an all low button as well. So this is all of my low res objects. To see how many polys we're sending over, we're going to go into Subtool, Merge, say Merge Visible. That's going to put a Z tool out in our stack here. So go ahead and select that. I'm going to turn off Colorize or Polypaint, turn on Polyframe, and now you can see all we're sending over is 36,000 points. It's going to be about 73,000 polygons. So totally manageable by Character Creator. Again, those limits are 300,000 polygons, which is about 600,000 tries. That's the limit. Of course, we're not going to get anywhere near that. So this is the geometry we're sending over with GoZ. We don't need this anymore, so we'll just delete that out of our scene here, say always okay. We'll go back to our subtool stack. Again, we can choose all high if we want to. We'll turn off polyframe. This is what we'll be sending over. Now, just like we did in the last video, if I click on the body here, if we scroll down to, we'll open up UV map and texture map, you'll see we have a texture loaded. Again, that process is polypaint your object. And if it is a high-res object, like say a Dynamesh object, it's 500,000 points or so, I will link in this video description a link to this video called ZRemesh and Project History Refresher. This is a way to get your high-resolution mesh to have subdivision history, a lower resolution mesh with higher resolution details with subdivision history. So that'll walk you through that process. Once you've done that, you can UV this object. Choose your texture size. In this case, UV map, we'll just do 1024. We'll do 2048. We'll go over here and say new from Polypaint. That'll transfer your Polypaint to your texture map. And it'll turn a texture map on, so when we send this over to Character Create, we'll have a texture. Now there is one more really important step I want to cover. Before we send this over, I'm going to Alt-tap the cloak here. And let's take a look at this. So I'm going to turn on Polyframe. It has 3 subdivision levels. There's no real sculpted details on here. So I'm going to go down to subdivision level 1, and you're going to see we have a low res cloth, and then as we subdivide, it's getting higher and higher res, so we can sculpt details on it. I need to make sure that any cloth objects that are going to be cloth simulated when we send this over to Character Creator have UVs, because we're going to need to paint a weight map to tell Character Creator wherever I paint white, I want it to be cloth simulated. Wherever I paint black, I want that to be bound to my object. This will make more sense as we go through the process. But for now, all I really need you to worry about is making sure that any cloth objects have UVs. In ZBrush, it's super easy to do. We've already got our Z plugin menu open, so I'm going to just scroll down here, and you're going to see there's a UV master section. Now, because this has subdivision history, I have to go over here to UV master, work on clone. That's going to duplicate this object off, delete the subdivision history, go down to the lowest subdivision history that you have, and now we can unwrap these low res verts. So what we're going to say is unwrap symmetry. It's a symmetrical object, so we'll have symmetry on. We're going to say unwrap, We're going to hit flatten so we can see the UVs. Incidentally, if you want to, I'm going to tap X to turn off X symmetry. We're going to hit W and then Alt tap on our object. We can actually go through here and move, scale, and rotate this geometry, and that will update your UVs. UVs in ZBrush, you just treat them just like you would any other geometry object, only everything is flattened to a plane. So if these are the UVs we like, we can go over here to unflatten. We're going to copy these UVs, go back to our subtool stack to the cloth cloak object that has our subdivision history. We'll paste those UVs, and now this object will inherit those UVs. Now, one thing it did do was rename my subtool when I did that, so let's go in here and say rename and just get rid of that _1. So with cloth cloak selected, if you want to check your UVs, go down here. Again, choose your UV map size. In this case, doesn't really matter. I'm going to go down here to texture map, new from UV check. That will go through and show your UVs. You can also do new from UV map, and that'll give you a slightly different look. And if you don't want to see the polygons here, just turn off polyframe. We can do new from UV check. And if you hover over this, you'll see we have a 2048 texture, and wherever it's gray, there's no overlapping UVs. Wherever it's red, there are overlapping UVs. In this case, no overlapping UVs, so that's good. So let's go ahead and turn texture off. And in fact, we don't even need this texture associated with the object. That was just to show you how it works. I'm going to say texture off there as well. So now we have UVs for what we want UVs, textures for our body. We'll make the weight map in just a minute. We're going to send this all over to Character Creator. So again, right at the top here, with everything visible and everything nicely labeled, we're going to say Go Z All. That's going to drop all of our subtools down to the lowest subdivision history and send those verts over to Character Creator for us to rig, skin weight, pose, and then send those poses back to ZBrush to our pose manager so we can have multiple poses that we can play with. So it loaded up Character Creator for us and gave us this Go Z dialog options box. So we can just keep the defaults, create prop, update mesh and texture, merge all props. We can see we have the meshes all checked. They're all going to be created as props for now. Here's our triangle count, well within the limits. We have textures turned on for our body and our eyeballs. Eyeballs, we don't need to have that big. I'm going to drop this down to like 512, and we can say update. So here's our character all loaded into Character Creator, just like we did in the previous video. We can open up this body section here. All of our objects are merged under one prop node here. So what I can do is the body and the eyes, the smoothing mode is set to normal. You can see if I want to see my vertex color or my poly paint from ZBrush, all I got to do is go over here and change this view mode over here from normal to smooth. I can do that for all the rest of these objects just by selecting one, shift selecting the rest, and changing all those at once over to smooth mode. Now again, just like we did in the previous video, again, the setup is all the same. So that's why we're moving a little bit faster. I'm going to go over here, select that top body node. And under Modify Attributes tab, we're going to go down here to AccuRig. That's going to go into AccuRig modes. We're going to be doing a lot of AccuRigging in here. I'm going to turn the eyeball off for the body. And then for the body geometry down here, I'm going to turn that eyeball on. We're going to create guides that's going to tell Character Creator where to put our skeleton. In order to position those accurately, we're going to do that with just the body showing. So in this instance, we're going to say, okay, we're going to create guides with our selected mesh, and then hit the Create Guides button. And now we're going to position our guides. So using this diagram, we're going to go and move these around. I'm going to click this Gizmo Display button. We're going to drop the gizmo sizes down. And then again, using this diagram, we're going to place this one right at the base of the skull here. This one will go right at the base of the neck. We're going to follow the sweep of the neck down to position our collarbone. So we'll put that right here, and then that's going to shoot over to our shoulder here. We're going to move that up. And again, the parallel line from the traps and then the chest, that'll kind of tell us where to position this shoulder. Now, because we have symmetry selection on and midpoint placement, we're moving objects or the guides symmetrically across that midpoint axis because our geometry is symmetrical, as well as keeping those guides right in the middle of our geometry as we move these points around. So again, this will go right underneath the belly button here for the hips. This will go in the crease of the thigh here. and then the knee, the ankle, right there in the middle, and then the foot, we're going to put that right in front where the toes are going to start to curl. So now that we've got our guides placed, let's go down here and say generate skeleton. He's got 5 fingers here, so we'll choose 5, generate skeleton. And just like last time, if you want to reposition any of these bones, you can select them, you can turn off midpoint placement. Feel free to move these around. We'll turn midpoint placement back on. And you'll also see we have finger guide buttons on here. So let's go in here, we'll choose this frame right hand. So here's our right hand. Let's go ahead and position these guides. And again, to make this a little bit easier for you, you can go in here to body, change the smoothing mode down here to wireframe on shaded, and you can use your geometry to help you position these guides if that's helpful. And again, we're just following that diagram. Again, that index finger straight back will show you where, so you follow this line straight back and then move this over a bit. And then we'll try and make all of our guides in a straight line here. You're going to see this is our special thumb guide. Select the bottom part to move the guide over. Again, we want to be lined up. And then that top arrow, make sure you select that so you can change the rotation. You're going to see we're going to need to nudge this over so that as this arrow falls down, it'll fall right on that nail bed. And there's our final guide right there. Everything's looking good. I'm going to go back to body, change this back to normal. And because we had symmetry on, their other guides on the other hand should be fine. Double check them just to make sure. If everything looks good, now we're ready to bind our skin. Now, unlike the other characters we brought over in the previous 2 videos, all of these objects are actually going to be smooth bound. There's no accessories or rigid bound objects. Of course, you can send over accessories later if you want. Just watch the previous video on how to do that, as well as having objects from character creator accessories added to this and sent back over to ZBrush. Again, all that's covered in the previous video, so I'm not going to do it here. So in this case, to bind our skin, I'm just going to select this very top node. We're going to change the target mesh to all meshes, and we're going to go down here to say bind skin. That's going to bind all of our verts to the entire skeleton. Because it's all kind of cloth objects and they're going to bend with his body, we don't need to worry about making anything rigid, with the exception of the cloth cloak, but that's kind of a special case, which we'll walk through in just a minute. So now that we're bound, we can go down here and before we leave AccuRig, we can check animation with this button. We'll go through here with motion and we'll do our body rig full body just to do a full calisthenics pose. And you're going to see 2 issues that are going to come up. Number 1, you can play through this animation. And in fact, just in case you needed this, you can go down here to 1x. You can actually change the speed that the animation plays. Or you can scrub through the animation here. And you're going to see right at the very beginning, when he moves his neck around, the neck cloth actually bends with his head motion. It kind of pushes it up and down. We definitely don't want that, so we're going to change the skinning. Another thing you're going to see is that our cloth cloak isn't behaving like cloth because it's just bound to his body. So as he moves his arms up, whoop, it kind of stretches here and then this stays stuck to his chest. So we'll fix that as well. Another thing that might be a slight issue is you can see if we go down here to remove and restore a bind pose, his feet are kind of splayed out. I'm not going to worry about that too much, but there is a fix for that. First, we're going to go out of AccuRig mode. So just click that button there. That takes us out of AccuRig, so now we have a skeleton, and we have skin weights. And the very first thing we need to do, before we do anything else, select, oh, and you'll also notice we have a character as opposed to a prop now. Select that very top body node, go up here to Go Z, and we're going to relink everything back to ZBrush just to make sure that any verts that moved from Character Create are going to be represented and updated in ZBrush. So relink, select it for everything, choose current pose, hit Go Z, and this will make sure, again, that all of our objects are in the exact same position from Character Create to ZBrush. You're going to see it nudged him slightly. Oh, another thing I should mention, before we sent this over, and again, if you watched the last video, you're in good shape, we did resize this character. We had our body selected, and then of course we can choose centimeters or feet, choose one of these presets, or dial in the slider, it's up to you, and then hit that resize button. So he is sized appropriately in Character Creator. So we've nudged these verts into position that match Character Creator. Go in here to File, Save, and that should open up a dialog box. Since I had previously saved this file, I'm going to go to File, Save As. Oops. I'm going to go to File, Save As. And of course, you can just save a Z project file. And then same thing in Character Creator. Let's go into Character Creator. You can do a file, save project, or like we did last time, you can hop over here to Content, go to Custom, go down here to Save. It's set to Actor and Character. Let's switch this over to Project, CC Project. We'll call it Avatar Ang, and we'll hit OK. And then you'll see over here, underneath all projects, CC project, we have an Avatar Ang file in here that we can quickly access. We'll switch this back over to Template. We'll go back to Scene, and again, this is all of our objects in our scene. And let's talk about that pose offset. So again, with this top node selected, go over here under Modify Attributes, and you're going to see there's a pose offset button you can choose. This goes into pose offset mode. You can choose any of these bones. You can go in here and hit mirror. You can rotate these around if you need to make, straighten things out. Just in case you had like clown feet that were splayed and he's walking with his feet splayed out, you can change this. In this instance, I'm not overly worried about that. I'm just wanted to show you that this was possible for you to do depending on your character. So we'll hop out of pose offset. And let's talk about skin weights. So remember, as his neck moved, it was bringing along the top of that collar with him because these top verts ended up being weighted to his head. Of course, I don't want, whenever he moves his head, for it to drag these verts around. So we're going to have these verts applied more towards his chest. So we're going to choose this collar object. We're going to go over here to the skin weights button, and that's going to put us into skin weights mode. Now you're going to see all of these bones are visible to us now. I'm going to right click these, and you're going to see the colors will update on our object. That's just telling you where these influences are. There's different color modes you can go through. You can say, I don't want to see colors. You can turn it off. You can go to color weights, and that'll give you, it's just a little bit more of an accurate representation of what the weights are. I'll show you that in a second. Or you can go over here to grayscale, and you can basically see that where things are painted white, they're assigned to that bone. So if I go up here, you're going to see, if I right click the neck, some of these weights are bound to the neck. If I go up here, some of these weights are bound to that bone. So generally speaking, I want all of these bound to this object here. Now there's two ways to do that. I'm going to show you the paint one first. So we have paint selected. I'm going to go down here to add. I'm going to crank that radius up on our brush just a little bit. And now again, right clicking spine 2. If I go through and paint, you're going to see it's going to paint these ones white where I want these verts to be associated with spine 2. Now this is a double-sided object, modeling wise, not material wise. So I'm going to go through here and make sure I paint on the insides as well. And I've painted half of it, so all I got to do is go over here and say, hey, mirror my right side to my left. It'll go ahead and mirror those weights for you. We'll do a quick cleanup pass. Now, if I go back to color weights mode, you're going to see wherever I have white painted as a full value of 1. You see, because color mode can show you just a little bit more nuance to your painted weights, you can see a little more accurately where your weights are. But anyway, go through here, paint your weights. Now our chest will move these verts around as opposed to our neck or our head, which is what we want. If we're good with this, let's go out of skin weights mode. We'll test that out. We'll go back in here to motion, body rig, full body. And again, as we scrub through this first part of the animation, you'll see as his head moves, his collar won't move along with it. But his arms are still moving that cloth, and we want that to be simulated. So let's go back here to remove, restore bind pose. I'm going to choose the cloth cloak. We're going to go back into skin weights. And right now, exact same bone, I'm going to right click this spine 2 bone. You're going to see we have a range of weights that are being influenced by a number of bones here. So what I want to do is go ahead and fill this object. One easy way to do that is I can go in here to selection as opposed to painting. I'm going to go down here to ignore backface, check that off. So if I click and drag over all these verts, they're going to turn red, showing you they're selected. And then I can go down here to where it says 1. I'm going to flood or quick replace all of these values for this spine to be multiple values. You can see there's a range of values in here. I'm going to flood all of those with 1. So now base spine 02 affects all of these verts. Incidentally, if you did bring over an object and you smooth bound it to your hierarchy, but you did want it to look like a rigid bound object, that's exactly how you would do that, the exact same process. So once we're good with that, we're going to go out of skin weights. Now the next thing we want to do is have our cloth collide with our body. However, if we were to actually collide our cloth with our verts of our body, it wouldn't be very performant. There's a better way to do that that'll keep the simulation running nice and quick. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up to our body node here, and then back in our modify menu over here underneath the attribute panel, we're going to scroll down and we're going to say collision shape. This is going to open up the collision shape editor. However, in order for us to put collision in the body here, we kind of need to not see that cloak. So let's hop out of that mode temporarily. We're going to turn off the eyeball for our cloth cloak, and then we'll go back in here and choose collision shape. So now that we can see a little bit better, we can put collision or a little shape that the cloth will collide with for any of these sections here. So we'll turn collision on. We're going to want to show active shapes so we can see them. And then we're going to go through here and select a part that we want to add collision to. In this case, since his cloak is only underneath his neck and then down about halfway down his arms, we're going to need his chest, shoulder, and upper arm. So we'll choose his chest. We'll say activate selected part. That's going to default to a capsule shape. You can go down here and change this to a box or a sphere if you want. Capsule will work fine for our purposes. And you can also change the axis if you want. We'll leave that at Y. Now, you may be wondering where the heck it is. We need to scale it up because it's buried right inside of his chest here. So we're going to hit R to go into scale mode. So WER is move, scale, and rotate. And we're going to use this scale here. We're going to pull the Z-axis scale out, and you're going to see it's going to scale this object up. And I'm going to overscale it at first just so we can see what's going on. And if I do the Y-axis scale, you're going to see it's going to elongate this capsule. So we'll use this to provide a collision object within the body, or the chest in this case, to kind of match the overall shape. Now, you're going to see, no matter what I do to the shape of this capsule, I can scale it up and I can make it thinner, it doesn't really apply itself nicely to his chest. So what we can do is I'm going to hit W. I'm going to move this over to the left here. We'll rotate it a little bit. We'll use this for half of his chest here. And again, we're going to get it as close as we can. We're going to bury this inside his mesh. There we go. And then what I can do is go over here underneath the, or next to the selected shape area, there's a little plus sign. If you click that, it'll duplicate this capsule. We can scoot this over. We'll rotate it a little bit this way. So we can actually use a couple of capsules to fill in that upper chest. Now, you don't want to go crazy with your capsules, especially if you're going to be sending this over to like a game engine. You want to keep your capsule count as low as you can. And because we're only doing simulation for his upper body, we don't need the cloth colliding with, you know, his legs or his hands or anything like that. It'll still be pretty cheap, so I think we'll be fine. So let's set up the capsules in the other parts of his body. I'm going to go over here to shoulder, activate selected part. Again, just move, scale, and rotate this into place. His shoulders will probably be nice and round, so I'm just going to go through here, keep these circles, and just put these right into the shoulder area. We'll go over to the other shoulder, activate selected part. Once again, move, scale, and rotate. Upper arm, activate selected part. Alright, we've got our capsules created and positioned. We'll go ahead and close out of that mode. We'll turn our cloth back on, our cloth cloak mesh. Let's go ahead and select our top node. And over here underneath the modify menu, you're going to see we have a physics section. So go ahead and click that physics tab. And we're going to activate physics. It's going to yell at us, hey, we have multiple materials. We need a weight map for one of them. So hit OK. And we want to put a weight map on our cloth cloak. However, we haven't made our weight map yet. So let's go back into ZBrush. I'm going to select my cloth cloak object. Now we have UVs for it, we just don't have a weight map. So again, we're going to paint white where we want the cloth to simulate, and then black where we want it to be bound to our body. So let's choose a white color. Let's go to BPA to select our paintbrush, which is essentially our standard brush with Z-add turned off. RGB intensity is up to 100. We're going to say color, fill object. Now this cloth cloak is filled with white, and then we can choose a black color. And this is a symmetrical object, so you can tap X on your keyboard to go into symmetry mode, and we can literally paint where we want the object to be bound to our skeleton. Now in this case, what I'm going to do, you're going to see since this is so low res, it's actually spreading out quite a bit. I want to keep this black pretty constrained up here to just this very top neck area. So what I can do is I can go up here, let's go up to saturation level 2. Let's turn on polyframe, go into solo mode, and if I zoom in here, let's do BZM, which grabs our Z modeler brush. I'm going to hover over an edge. We're going to hold down our space bar. We're going to choose this mask edge loop complete. We're going to tap this open edge loop here. I'm going to control click in our canvas to invert that mask. We'll turn off polyframe. And now with those verts unmasked and black selected, I'm going to say color, fill object. That will fill those verts with black. And now we have our weight map. So I'm going to go all the way down here to texture map. UV map 2048 is fine. I'm going to say texture map new from polypaint. There's our new weight map. However, if I was to send this over, there might be some issues because depending on compression and things like that, some of the black around the cloth might leak into the white part and cause that to not simulate correctly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to UV map border. I'm going to crank that all the way up to 16. And now when I say new from polypaint, you're going to see that white area grows past your UV border just a little bit more. And I think that'll keep us safer. So now to get this texture out of ZBrush, we're going to clone texture, and you can either go up here to texture export, again with that texture selected, or over here to texture export. We'll put this in here as cloth cloak. JPEG is fine. Just go ahead and hit save, hit OK. And I don't need this texture associated with my file, so I'm going to go ahead and turn texture off and go in here and just deselect it. And in fact, we can go over here and say texture off as well, so it's not loaded in our texture area. Now, if we're good with that, we can actually just take this undo slider and just undo back to where we were before. Make sure you don't undo back to where it changed the pose a little bit. Just undo back to where we relinked our file. I'm going to go out of solo mode, and now we're kind of back where we started, but we have a weight map to use now. So back underneath character creator, we have edit weight map for our cloth cloak object. We're going to go here to open, select our JPEG. And just to make sure, as one last little step that I like to do, if I really want to make sure our white areas are simulated and our black areas are not, I'm going to take this contrast and just crank that all the way up. And then I'm going to exit out of that mode. So now there's a few buttons we need to push in order to tell character creator, hey, I have physics in my scene and I want to turn them on. Right up here at the top of the menu here, you're going to see rigid body simulation button and a soft cloth simulation button. Go ahead and turn both of those on. And in fact, if we go in here to edit project settings, you're going to see, if I scroll down, rigid body, if I turn that off, it's going to turn that button off. So this is where those buttons actually point to. You're also going to see in here bake animation. We're going to use that in just a minute. So let's go ahead and close out of that menu. And one last thing we need to do, again, with our body selected, we have the physics, modify physics area, turn on this activate physics button, or this little checkbox here. So now when I go in here to motion, let's go ahead and here to go to soft physics, we'll do a spin around move. So now when I hit play, you're going to see the cloth is going to fall down on his body, and then it'll go ahead and spin around. There we go, all simulated. Now you're going to notice though, if I wanted to go to a particular frame and send that back over to ZBrush, there's going to be a problem. As soon as I touch this slider, it's going to snap back to just be cloth. I want to be able to scrub and have the cloth simulated as well. So in order to do that, we're going to go into Edit, Project Settings, and again, right in here in this global physics settings we were just in, turn on Bake Animation. What that's going to allow us to do is when we hit this play button, it's going to cache that cloth physics. And so now we're just going to play all the way through it. There we go. I'm going to pause it. And now when I scrub back through this area, we can choose a particular frame that we want to send back over to ZBrush. Also, if you need to, you can go down here again to this playback speed, and you can make that slower or faster if you want. And you're also going to see when I simulate this, it kind of falls into his body a little bit. It's really just colliding with those capsules that are just under his clothes. If I want, in the physics tab, I can go down here and I can say this margin here, it had set at 0.01. I'll just set this to 1. So now when I play through and it simulates, it'll keep that cloth kind of out from those capsules. There we go. And you're going to see another problem. Here, you can see where that capsule falls off, and then it goes right into his upper arm. Let's go ahead and fix that. Let's go to Remove, Restore Bind Pose. Select the top section here. We'll go back into Attributes. We're going to go over here into Collision Shape. I'm going to add collision for his lower arms. So we're going to say Activate Selected Part. And once again, we're just going to move, scale, and rotate these into place. There we go. The other arm, Activate Selected Part, and move, scale, and rotate. All right, so we'll go out of the shape editor here. We'll go grab another motion. And there we go. Everything's looking good. Now, if you want to send this pose back over, you can go up here to Plugins, ZBrush Pose Link, and we're going to send current pose to ZBrush. Of course, you can send over your T-pose and your A-pose if you want. We're going to choose this very top option, and it's going to take these low-res verts and then update our low-res verts in ZBrush, which of course have our associated high-res subdivisions level, so we can go and sculpt details. That'll move those all into place. And because we sent a pose over, our pose tools now has a pose in here. So we'll call this, let's go down here to rename. We'll call this Twirl 01. And you're going to see if we go down here to our layers menu, it's added a CC Pose Twirl 01 to all of our subtools here as a recordable layer. Let's go back into Character Creator. Let's go into Content, and then under Template, Animation, we're going to go in here to Motion. Let's go down here to Human Male Perform. And there's a saloon door in. So make sure under your scene you have your body selected, and then Content, we'll double click this saloon door in. That'll apply it to our object here. We're going to play so we can simulate the physics. There we go, and he's going to push that saloon door in. We'll go ahead and pause it there. That's a cool pose. We're going to say Plugins, ZBrush Pose Link. Send current pose over to ZBrush. That's going to give us a new pose in ZBrush with a new layer for all of our subtools. There we go. We'll go ahead and rename this to Saloon. And now I can switch between these two poses here. So now, this is something we haven't talked about before. Let's say I want to go down here to these pants and start sculpting. It's going to tell you, hey, we have layers on here, so you need to activate those layers in order to make any changes. Luckily in Character Creator, that's super easy to do. All you got to do is select the pose you want to edit, and then go down here to Edit Current Pose. You're going to see what that's going to do in your layers is turn on a record button. So let's go up here. I'm going to hold down Shift and turn off our poly paint. I'm going to choose a white color, and we'll choose Matte Cap Gray while we're sculpting. Again, I'm going to Alt tap the pants here. I'm going to tap X to go out of X symmetry because he's not symmetrical anymore. And then I can go through here and I can sculpt any wrinkle changes that I want manually. If I want to go through here and add some wrinkles, I can just go and sculpt those wrinkles. I can even go down here if I want to sculpt like my primary forms. I'll go down to like subdivision level 3 to make these a little easier to sculpt here. And speaking of cloth and sculpting, ZBrush does have dynamic simulation. If you want to know more about that, I have a ZBrush 2021 What's New playlist that covers all the basics. There's tons of videos in here on the basics of dynamic simulation within ZBrush. So check that series out if you want to know more about this. But just really quickly, just to show you, I have my brush menu loaded underneath all these Z plugins. So if I go down here to brush, elasticity, I can actually, for any brush, let's say I want to switch over to my pinch brush, I can take my simulation iterations, crank that up, and I can use this to go through and pinch and simulate cloth at the same time. And if I want higher resolution wrinkles, I can go up to subdivision level 4, and I can just use my pinch brush as I'm sculpting to go through here and run a simulation while I'm using the pinch brush. You can also do stuff like B, C, K, brush cloth hook. You can go through here and pull your mesh around. You could even go in here to, for example, thick skin, turn that on. We'll crank that thick skin down a little bit, and you can move your mesh around with cloth brushes and kind of constrain it to a certain layer so that you can go through and kind of just make some wrinkles like that. Again, feel free to use any ZBrush sculpting techniques to your advantage. And then once you're done making those changes, at whatever subdivision level you'd like, all you have to do is go back to the Pose Tools plugin, choose Save Current Record. We were in edit mode, now we're saving that, and now we're back where we started. We'll go ahead and go back up here. We'll hold down Shift, turn on this paintbrush to turn our poly paint back on. We'll switch our matte cap gray over here to Skin Shader 4. And now we have a file set up that, again, we can send poses back over. If you want to know how to send accessories back over, watch the previous video, and you can continue to make all sorts of cool poses with your custom character. Now, one thing I want to mention is if the cloth that you're sending over to Character Create is a little too low res, like you can see if I have my cloth cloak selected and I go down to subdivision level 1, there's not a lot of verts here to simulate, you know, so you're not going to have that many wrinkles. If you want to add more wrinkles, what I can do is I'm going to go up to subdivision level 2, and then I'm going to say delete lower. So the exact same setup process we've already gone through, only when I go Z this, it's going to go Z more verts over, and that'll simulate more wrinkles because we have more geometry resolution. But again, the same process still applies. Send over the mesh, create your guides, create your skeleton, bind your weights, turn on cloth physics, bring in your weight map. So we'll go ahead and do that real quick. And one thing I just noticed, if I go down here to the lower arm, for example, activate selected part, I can just use these sliders here, like the red slider, for example. It's already going to the top part and the bottom part for that joint. I can just use this scale to go through, and then use this scale to go through and continue to thin this out while still maintaining my top to my bottom. So hey, learn something new every day. And then if I want to do, again, an overall uniform scale, I can just scale this down and then use Y to position those capsules pretty easily. Alright, so I've got my body set up with my new higher resolution cloth. So when I hit play here, you can see it's going to simulate to the body. Now let's talk a little bit more about those physics settings. So like we did previously, I'm going to go back to frame 1, and I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to set this soft origin collision up to 1. You're also going to see there's self collision that you can change if you'd like. And we'll simulate this. There we go. It'll kind of be more on his body here. And in fact, let's go ahead and turn this margin up to like 1.5. And any minor corrections, we can go ahead and do those in ZBrush. But you're going to see, while we're simulating that cloth, we're getting a lot more wrinkles, a little more detail in our cloth. And in fact, you can go over here and change the cloth type. So let's go over here. If you double click leather, you're going to see these properties are going to change a little bit. So here's general, satin, fleece. Here's leather. So if you have leather properties dialed in, and also feel free to go in and change any of these properties you'd like. Let's go back to frame 1 and we'll resimulate. And this will be more of a leather type simulation. Same thing for hair and wind. So here's cloth, here's hair, here's wind. If you double click on any of these, you'll see down here these wind settings will update. So if you want to have like a cape with wind blowing while you're doing your animations, that'll be settings for that. In the next video, we're going to go in depth on the Pose Tool plugin itself. We're going to start with sending transpose master data over with layers, converting that to a pose, then discussing ZBrush dynamic cloth, surface noise, and general Pose Tool functionality. In fact, I can give you a quick sneak preview. I've gone ahead and sent over a couple of poses just using the cloth that we just talked about. So here we have our two poses. So let's go ahead and grab our Z plugin here, go into Pose Tools here. So we have Pose 1 and Pose 2. I haven't renamed these yet, but essentially the swish pose and then the saloon door pose. And either one of these, if I want to edit them, I'm free to do so. I can go in here at any point. So if I want to say edit this pose, I'll just select that pose and then go down here to edit current pose. That's going to turn on record for all of the layers that make up this pose. And again, we'll go in more detail in the next video, but just again, to get you started, here we are now in Pose 2 recording. If I want to see a little easier, I'm going to hold down Shift, turn off our poly paint here, Alt tap the cloak, and you can see I might need to pull it out in a few areas or hold down Shift and smooth it out in some areas. And again, grab the shirt here, go through here and just make some minor adjustments. Use the inflate brush. Any sculpting tools in ZBrush that you have available to you, feel free to use. But you can see, did a pretty good job. And anywhere where I need to go in and do some minor adjustments, it's super easy. Just go in here, say edit current pose. Once we're done editing, all we have to do is go over here and say save current record. That'll record all of those changes back to that layer. And then I can go in here and edit my next pose.